Hello and welcome to The Green Voice. I'm Grant Ervin with SNB USA here at the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University. We have a really exciting guest here today with us, Adam and Andrew from Phipps Conservancy. I wanted to start the conversation off, though, before we do that, with a little bit of an announcement from our team at Pittsburgh Earth Day, because Pittsburgh Earth Day is working with Phipps and the Phipps Conservancy and Botanical Gardens and presenting Fleur, a music, art, and culture botanical soiree in celebration of the Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens Spring Flower Show, which is exciting. It's coming up. And that date's going to be Thursday, April 3rd, 2025 at Phipps. For more information, you can either go to pittsburghearthday.org or you can go to the Phipps website. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Fleur and a whole host of other items that are coming up. Adam, Andrew, it's great to have you guys here on The Green Voice.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
So Andrew is the first tour of duty. Adam's with us. This is second tour of duty.
Old hat, yeah.
Old hat. You're a seasoned, grizzled veteran. So welcome, but great to have you back in the conversation. In fact, they gave you these nice little mugs too. So I mean, you didn't get that the first time.
No, this is
Andrew must.
What's next?
Yeah, what's next? I mean,
I'm pleased.
Yeah, the swag. I mean, look at that, the product placement. You did like a nice little sip. So excellent job. Lots of ground to cover. We want to touch about Fleur and the visitor experience, and we also got a new kind of program, I guess, with the climate toolkit. So I want to touch base with that. But maybe before we jump into some of like the details, Adam, maybe if you want to start with just reminding folks who you are and your role at Phipps, and then we'll get into Andrew.
For sure, yeah. So my name's Adam Haas. I've been at Phipps. This February will be my 13th year, which is hard for me to wrap my head around. So I am seasoned, I guess. Now I'm grizzled. But my role is, my title is the Interpretive Programs Manager. So, which, doesn't mean much to most people. It's a little, at a parties, what you do.
I'm the
interpretive programs manager. They either run away.
Right.
But basically,
occasionally though, you probably get the person. It's like, I'm going to grab another drink.
It's hit or miss. It's hit or miss. But interpretation in the museum context is basically like taking the collection and helping guests make meaning out of it. So instead of language interpreting, we're taking the collection, which at Phipps is plants and the buildings and sustainability, and then guests come in. We want to make sure they have a good experience, a fun time, but a meaningful one. And so connecting them to nature and sort of all that's under, it's the beautiful flower displays that really do that. And then I'm there to kind of help, with signage and interpretation and programming to kind of drive that message home.
That's interesting. Awesome. I want to come back to that in a second. Andrew, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I'm Andrew Lampl. I'm the Climate Toolkit Manager at Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens. So I'm sure we'll get into this, in more detail, but the Climate Toolkit in a nutshell is a collaborative network of museums, zoos, science centers, botanic gardens, arboretums, aquariums that are all banded together to address climate change. And so it was a program that was launched, it's coming up about 5 years now, actually, launched at Phipps just before pandemic hit, probably like February 2020 or so, but it's grown significantly in the last few years. And we're actually partnered with over 200 museums and gardens right now.
That's amazing.
And so I run, kind of all the nitty gritty details, different programmings, the network, getting museums and gardens connected with each other, and just doing whatever we can to address climate change, in the cultural sector.
Wow, that's fabulous. Yeah. And so had you been with Phipps prior to that, or did the program bring you here?
The program brought me here. I've just hit my 2-year anniversary yesterday, I want to say.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so not quite as old hat as Adam, but I plan on being there. Yeah, someday. And Phipps is great because there's a lot of longevity. People stay pretty regularly, 5, 10, 15 years, which I think speaks to the culture of the conservatory.
That's awesome. Yeah. We were talking before we started. So you guys are in the same department, right? And do you collaborate between that interpretive experience and the climate toolkit, and talk a little bit about maybe like the nuts and bolts of your group, the marketing team? I think you're saying, right?
Yeah. We were joking earlier that neither Andrew nor I have any marketing experience whatsoever. We're like the marketing team kind of adopts all the misfit toys that they don't know where else to put. So I think both of our roles sort of touch on really every department at Phipps and every part of the guest experience. So Andrew's more like not necessarily the day-to-day of guests coming in, but that sustainability message that that's part of my job to get across. And then that sort of transcends, like that applies more broadly then to the whole network. Like we just started through the Climate Toolkit, a working group about interpreting climate change. So how do we talk about things like this with an audience? And, who is your audience and what's the most effective way to talk to them? Because
that's interesting.
There's doom and gloom. There's, if you put just facts about it up, is that going to change anyone's mind if they, so there's a whole strategy and a lot of thinking goes into how do we address these things?
How do you talk about it?
Yeah. And so, the Climate Toolkit addresses, everything from, decarbonizing campuses and stuff like that to talking to guests about these things. So that kind of really runs the whole gamut.
It's interesting. I was thinking about taking this conversation one other way, but I want to start here actually. Like, talk to me about the Climate Toolkit. Like you have this network, because I do think this messaging thing is really kind of, you touch us upon something there, Adam. Like, but what is the toolkit?
Yeah. Right? So the toolkit, it's both a resource platform and also a collaborative hub. Okay. So on the resource platform, there are 9 different focus areas that it's delineated into. These focus areas were essentially synthesized through 2 key pieces of climate resources. One was the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The other, yes, the SDGs, and then the other was Project Drawdown's Library of Climate Solutions.
Terrific book.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite climate resources out there.
Yeah.
And for anybody that doesn't know, the Project Drawdown is essentially the top 100 climate solutions that exist right now, and that we, if we had the will to scale up and scale out these solutions, we could address climate change and solve it today.
As a kind of sustainability nerd, that is one of the books that I have dog-eared, highlighted, underlined. It's such a great resource in terms of thinking about like a lot of this, and I don't want to say simple, but the available technological solutions that are there.
That's exactly right. And to Adam's point, I think Project Drawdown and we model this in the Climate Toolkit, they really take a positive solutions forward stance on climate change. It's no doom, there's no gloom. It's like we have the resources that we need. We just need to find the will to to care and to collectively act.
My big message with climate and through my work in this space is really it's about budgeting and procurement. At the end of the day, it's about what you buy, how you buy it, and how you deliver it, and you have to have the money in order to do so. So whether that's like energy systems or investing in renewables or battery energy storage or how you're designing a building, you're making effectively a buying choice, right, in terms of equipment. And Phipps has been like a leading model in that, right?
Absolutely.
How does tell me about the network a little bit too, I guess. Like what does that network look like?
Yeah, so the network, so as I said, it started in 2020, I think with 10 or so botanic gardens. In the few years, since we've been running it, it's grown to over 200 different museums, gardens, zoos, all across not just the country, but the world. And we're, it's primarily a virtual platform at this moment. So we have opportunities for collaborative programming from our quarterly webinar series. We have different working groups that we're getting off the ground for more peer-to-peer based collaboration on things like electrification, climate interpretation.
So like how does this work? How are you guys doing this?
Yeah, it's like what equipment are you using? Like do you have diesel or fossil based let's say like landscaping equipment or fleet vehicles? Are there electric alternatives that certain gardens or certain museums are exploring that you would be willing to share with others? And so, that the working group model is like a really nice, productive way for people to like push the envelope forward, trade resources, in a more direct setting. We also have workshops on regenerative thinking, which is something that we're really grounded in at Phipps Conservatory, thinking about how in regenerative thinking, you kind of assess how you're operating not in isolation, but nested in different communities. And you want to think about the earth as a proper stakeholder in every decision that you make.
Yeah.
And so are you regenerating the earth with the decisions that you're making and the actions that you're doing, or are you detracting?
Wow.
And so I think that's like a really solid guideline, or a North Star for both Phipps, but also for the Climate Toolkit, to kind of like broadcast out.
It's really amazing because it's a total mind flip, right? In terms
Absolutely.
of like conventional thinking.
Yes.
Adam, one of the things I was curious to ask you about, and maybe to do it in this context, like, how are you, through the interpretation work that you're doing, kind of taking this message and applying it to the footprint of the campus? Like,
Sure.
Maybe if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really a balance, So I think, people have been coming to Phipps for 130 some years because it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
You come and see the orchids, you come and see the flower show, and you feel good when you're in there.
Yeah.
And,
it's a regenerative
it
place,
is just
restorative.
That, it
yeah,
is.
maybe
It
a better
is.
word.
And that's, it's been part of the cultural fabric, and that's what draws people in. And so they come in, and it is a balance between they come to see beauty, they come to spend time with their families and enjoy themselves. So you don't want to be too heavy-handed with, isn't this beautiful? Well, it's all dying.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
we're all in trouble. So you have to convey the gravity of the situation, but like Andrew was saying, but in a positive frame where you give people not just the this is really important, but this is how we can address it. These are some of the things we are doing. This is what we're doing at Phipps.
Yeah.
And this place is beautiful. The Center for Sustainable Landscapes, the building in the back, that's a nice place to work. It doesn't matter what you think about climate change, where you fall on the spectrum of, it's a hoax.
You like being there.
Yeah. Heaven for it's beautiful. It feels good. And so taking that sort of, people are primed sort of when they're in the space to feel a certain, what we would describe as biophilia, this innate kind of connection we have to living things, and why it feels good when the sun is shining and the birds are singing, and it's humans that we respond to that. And so you want to capitalize on the Phipps experience, but you want to be meaningful and sort of deft in how you sort of talk about these things. So some of the ways we do that are, it's one thing to go and read something and say, okay, cool. And then you got to get your kids back in the car and you get in traffic. And by the time you get home, it's gone. So it's really kind of an effective way if people are motivated to take some action, to let them do it right then, because they're in that moment.
Yep.
And so they're walking through, they're seeing all these beautiful things. And we've partnered with a green energy provider that Pennsylvania is one of the states where you can select your energy provider. So you tell Duquesne Light or whoever, I want to purchase electricity from them. So still comes the exact same
Somerset
way.
Wind.
Yeah. It's
Solar
all. It's
Farm
still.
X, yeah.
It seems. It's perceived to it seems like it's a big challenging thing to choose your electric provider.
No, it's pretty easy.
It's super easy, but there's this perceived barrier.
Might be like 5 clicks.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
it. Yeah.
So we have people stationed there from the green energy company saying, hey, we can help you do this. Take a few minutes. You can choose, if you choose an energy provider that's all renewable,
Right.
Phipps will give you a year membership. So you can, it's just, and then it switches over. It's a meaningful impact.
Right.
It's measurable. You can say there's 8 tons of carbon that's going to be, mitigated from.
And we have X number of members.
And we have
that
X
make
number
this
of members.
choice.
And so it's a really effective way to say, how are we addressing climate change? Is this working? Well, we can say this is the thousands of tons that we've saved over the few years and the thousands of households that have switched. So that's just one example of what I love is it's measurable and it's impactful and it's really happening. And then people don't have to do anything else.
That's it.
It's one of those behaviors where
Right.
it's one and done. And in fact, if you want to switch back, you have to go and do something. And so people are loath
That's
to
6 clicks.
right.
Yeah.
So
It's
I-
more- it's more
I'm not
difficult.
doing that.
Yeah.
So in perpetuity, maybe, these people are having green energy in their house.
What do you guys think? This is more of a broader question. But I'm curious, this idea of switching the frame, right? That the issues of climate, they're not just existential anymore, right? I think we're seeing the impacts of climate change, whether that's as we're taping this, kind of the fires in California, or there was just a bomb cyclone off the coast of Ireland and Scotland where they're experiencing like 100-mile-per-hour winds. I mean, it gets windy and rainy there, but like that's like a little like off the charts, right? But for so long, like the frame around the climate discussion has been doom and gloom. It's a polar bear on a sheet of ice floating out into the nothing, right? What does the positive frame do? And like, what are some of those messages that you are conveying at Phipps, in a positive context?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to your point, there's so much research now that doom and gloom message has been completely ineffective.
It creates a sense of nihilism for a lot of people.
Exactly.
Like, what can I do?
Nihilism, or just detachment, or and the polar bear specific example. It's so far removed from our day-to-day existence that
unless you live in Manitoba.
Right. Exactly. Right? So it's hard to emotionally I can feel bad for that polar bear, but I don't know how to change my own life or behavior to make that polar bear's life a better existence.
Right.
And so I think we talk a lot about this at Phipps, and we certainly haven't cracked the code or by any means, but what it comes down to is coming back to your local place, your love of what is unique about your region. How is climate change impacting your locality, your life, your community, and who are the actors on the ground that are doing great work that you can tap into? And so it's a much more positive and effective argument and message to care about your own locality. And so, think about Pittsburgh, like climate change is going to hit us and is hitting us differently than Florida, than Ireland, than California. And so
water in our basement.
Exactly. Yeah. Like flooding, stormwater management, mudslides, landslides, things like that. And so, we think about how do we get people who are coming into our conservatories, into our spaces to care deeply about our region. And from that point of view, then say, like, if here are like X 10 different actions that you can take, personal actions, or or organizations to get connected with, and in that way, we you think about regions as hubs, and so Pittsburgh starts to become a climate action hub, and New York and Boston and all the cities across the world. And if everybody's doing their part and every city is kind of regenerating itself and becoming more climate aligned, I think that's exactly. And so, and it becomes much more tangible. Yeah. Right.
What are you seeing, Adam? One of the things I wanted to ask you, maybe fold it into this context, like, walk us through like the Phipps experience. Like, the thing that I've always been amazed about, is the campus that it sits on, and that when you are, talking about like these issues that Andrew's bringing up, when you go through what we'll call the original campus, or when you get to like the Center for Sustainable Landscapes, or walk us through, like, give us like a little bit of virtual tour, and how you are taking and interpreting this in like each section. I'd be curious.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. I mean, the campus is really unique because the original conservatory was built in 1893. So, 132 years, whatever. And so it's just been this beautiful, breathtaking place. But you walk through history a little bit when you go in there. So you come into the Welcome Center, which is relatively new. That was the first building that got us really thinking about green building and really changed Phipps at an institutional level. Like, our mission changed. And that was because we needed a new Welcome Center. We needed a gift shop. We needed a cafe because we had just spun off from the city. And we needed some cash flows.
Yeah, it's it's an economic decision.
Yeah, it was,
right?
and it was like, we got to sink or swim here. We got to figure out how we're going to stay afloat. Now
I think the budget line item is cost of goods sold.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Each customer coming in and you're selling them food and stuff like that. But it was in that process of, okay, we need this building, that Phipps as an institution started realizing, for 120 years so far, we've been telling people plants are important, nature's important, you should care about these things. But we realized what we didn't know, or we didn't think about, which seems obvious now, but at the time, that buildings and the way we were operating and a glass house itself all contribute in a really negative way to this thing we're saying that's really important. So it takes a lot of energy to heat a glass house. It takes a lot of energy to grow exotic plants. And so we kind of came to this moment where it's like, we're saying this is important, but we're not necessarily operating a way that reflects that ethos.
Which is, to just unpack that, because that's something that's really fundamental, I think, for a lot of our audience. You made a business decision, right? That you are effectively seeing like your audience and what it costs to run, quote unquote, like a sustainable business means that you have to pay attention to these things like energy, waste, and water and the physical structure.
For sure.
Now, what's the next step?
Well, then it was sort of like that shifted everything. Like the rudder on the ship changed and said, this is the way we're going to do things. And it's not just,
what year about was that?
The Welcome Center opened up in 2005.
Okay, so the mid-2000s.
So we're 20 years old. And 20 years ago, LEED wasn't talked about like it is now. And at least, it certainly is widely. And, green building to us at the time was like, we thought it meant having plants in it or, physically painted green. That wasn't a term we even knew.
Right.
And so that shifted not just, then the building projects down the line, which, the CSL in the back of the campus, but also what we did sell in the gift shop and what we sold in the cafe and how we grew plants and what our shows were about and how we, facilities operated and all it really shifted everything about Phipps. And so you walk into that, and then you go up into the original conservatory, and it's stunning. But like I said,
it's a historic structure. Single pane glass.
And I think Richard, our president and CEO, likes to say it's the best example of the worst kind of design from an energy perspective. From aesthetically, it's stunning and it's evocative. It brings emotion out in people. But if you're strictly looking at an energy perspective, you're single pane glass. You're in Pittsburgh and you're growing exotic plants.
Right.
It shows
all bad ideas.
All bad ideas.
Yeah.
And it shows in 1893 that was like
good ideas in 1893.
Right.
As things change and evolve.
We're humans. We can conquer nature.
Right.
And so you walk through the campus and it's beautiful. And we are updating it. Like we have a plan of decarbonizing that campus, the conservatory. And that's already started. But then you walk through and you go to the newer buildings. We have the Center for Sustainable Landscapes, which opened 2012. We have the Exhibit Staging Center, which opened just before the pandemic, and a nature lab, like a modular classroom. And you walk through and you see, in 1893, this is what good design looked like.
Yeah.
In 2000s, this is what good design looks like. And both are cutting edge at the time, but it demonstrates how that
there's an evolution.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So what's important to us now, and that's now that we understand that we're not going to conquer nature, that we're part of this ecosystem, and if we want our own lives to be healthy, then we have to make sure that the ecosystem around us is healthy.
Right.
And those buildings reflect that.
And take us outside too, because like you've done the same thing with the surrounding area, right?
Sure. Yeah. So we have, we have several gardens. We have within, 17, unique spaces inside and outside. And especially in the back of the campus where these newer buildings are, the landscape is stunning and it's all native plants.
Yeah.
And you can come back there, like Andrew was talking about making it local. You can see how beautiful our native plant systems are, our ecosystem.
The native plant systems to Oakland.
Yeah, yes. Right. Well, we have plenty of deer. We'll walk out. There's deer on our green roof sometimes. And you remember, this is their purview too.
I wonder, sometime I go over the hillside and hike in Shenley Park there, if I'm going to see a little sign that says Japanese knotweed.
Yeah.
Invasive species.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. So it's all native, but it takes some effort to those invasives that go into the campus.
Right.
Sure. Like knotweed. But it is just to walk through the campus and just to be surrounded by that beauty, but then also understanding this is Pennsylvania. This is how beautiful this place we are in. And like Andrew said, people responding to the uniqueness and the essence of the place they're from. And Pittsburgh, we're proud.
Yeah.
I never realized how proud Pittsburghers were till I left Pittsburgh.
And then you came
and
back.
And the game back was yeah. Not everyone has the same sort of city pride as we do here.
My cousin told me one time, Pittsburghers always, this is, I think, that the heart of that pride is that they always compare amazing things from other places to things in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Like he lives in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, for example. He's like, it's just like my Washington, the Grand Tetons. It's like the Laurel Islands.
We got that.
You got that. It's all right. That creek and stream, crystal blue.
I've seen that.
Yeah, it's like Pine Creek.
Yeah, we got that.
We got that. One of the things I'd be interested, Andrew, is like, what are some of the things that you're taking from the network, the Climate Toolkit network, and are starting to impart with like your colleagues? Like, you guys are obviously at the leading and the bleeding edge, I think, at Phipps. But are there things that you're hearing, seeing, that you're bringing back to the team from the broader network?
That's a great question. Well, part of my role is going to these annual conferences for the different partner organizations. So, we're the
Called
Climate
them
Toolkit.
fishing and hunting expeditions.
Kind of, yeah. Yes, the partner organizations, it's the Alliance of Museums, the AZA, which is aquariums and zoos, BGCI, which is Botanic Gardens Conservation International, so International Network of Gardens, the APGA, which is American Public Gardens Association. And so I get to travel to at least 2 of these different conferences per year, and I get to connect on the ground with, these different partner orgs. And it's a wonderful way to see, one, to get that in-person connection, and 2, to hear what's on the ground, like what's happening in the innovative world of climate action. And so, I just got to go to the Science Center conference in Chicago a couple months ago.
Okay.
And I would say science centers are among the types of cultural institutions that are leading the charge in climate change. They obviously have a much deeper scientific take on climate, on environment, on nature-based solutions. And so there's a lot of really innovative stuff happening in,
I just had a
in
picture
that
of
world.
like conservatories versus science centers, like the West Side
Like a rumble,
Story.
yeah.
Well, honestly, yeah. Well, and I mean, you bring up a good point. I would love to have a little musical escapade with our different orgs. But we talk about this in our climate and interpretation working group. What are the unique advantages of our different types of orgs in addressing climate change? So Adam touched on it, in botanic gardens and conservatories, we tap into a gentler love of nature and of
go to
plant
each
wonder.
Each space for a different experience.
Exactly. So, you go to that experience to tap deeply into nature. Whereas if you're going to an art museum, maybe you're going more to be challenged, right? And in that way, climate messaging can be a little more in your face, a little more provocative. With science centers, it's like you have the opportunity to address like science facts. Solutions that are centered around around science and research. So I think there's different opportunities in our wide cultural sector to address climate change from different angles. And so if we want to highlight and tease that out in the Climate Toolkit, because we're such a diverse, wide array of partners.
Is there something that like from a fellow conservatory that you picked up, or something that you're like, guys, we got to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I could throw in a few examples. Like, New York Botanical Garden in New York, they're doing wonders with climate action, and they have a really interesting program with city composting, where they use their site as a public drop-off space, where a few times a month or a year, they open it up to the city. Say, bring your food waste, bring your scraps, bring your composting, and they work with Compost NYC to then
as a
mitigate
site.
Exactly. Yeah. So to like mitigate tons and tons of waste that would go into the landfill and produce emissions and methane, and instead, so that's just one small example. But you can use your conservatory or your museum campus space to regenerate community in a way that
that's fascinating.
Yeah, that others that you might not think.
Yeah.
And I think this is a new space that museums are getting into, but it feels like every year the action is deeper, and more museums and gardens are committing to sustainability.
Curious, are you having these conversations with other, like the Pittsburgh Science Center or the Carnegie team there across the street from you guys in Oakland, or the Pittsburgh Zoo? Like, is there an integrated conversation that's happening there, both with like things like the Climate Toolkit, but also with like interpretation?
Yeah, I think we'd like to see it push further in this next year or two. We do have a network of Pittsburgh institutions that are part of the Toolkit.
Okay.
So Pittsburgh Zoo and Carnegie Museum of Natural History, I would say, are our two closest partners.
Yep.
All the Carnegie museums are connected to us, but the CMNH being right across the street is
easy.
quite nice.
Yeah.
And they also have great. They have a whole rural community program called CRISP, which is the Center for Regional Systems Partnerships, something like that.
Because they're also bringing folks like Falling Water and like the host of partnerships broader than just the city of Pittsburgh.
Exactly.
Right?
It's really like how do you talk to rural communities about climate change without using potentially hot button words like climate change or global warming. But we're finding that there's absolute consensus if you don't use trigger words, that we can all agree that the weather is changing, that it affects our crops, it affects our biodiversity, and we all want to do something about it.
Do you see that with the communications, Adam, though? Like to back to that, like in your interpretation world, like Andrew, you use like trigger words, right? At the end of the day, it's about like quality, beauty, a better product.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
What are ways? How are you approaching that? I guess.
Yeah, I think we just try to model that this way of doing things. It's a better way. It's more comfortable. It's healthier for your family. It's beautiful. If this is where, like I was saying with the CSL, this is where I would want to work because it's great. And whether climate is top of mind for me or not, I just see, and everyone wants their families to be healthy. Everyone wants, a fair shake, and it's a more equitable way to approach everything, really, and understanding that. And another thing that's in the interpretation world, it's sort of newer, I guess, but a really, I think, important thing, and something we're going to start talking about much more is this idea that most people underestimate how concerned people are about climate. So most people think, most people.
It's never
don't
a top level issue.
Well, yeah, but I think most people.
If you unpack it.
Yeah, but most people assume, what do they think like 80% of people don't believe in climate change. But reality is almost everyone believes that it's happening. And so there's this
it's a false social reality, right?
False social reality. And it's like, oh man, like no one else really cares about it. I do, but no one else. But most people do. Much higher number of people care about it than we collectively think.
Yeah.
And so when you can help people realize that, say, no, like, I know you care, but a lot of people care about this. That can be a catalyst for action and flipping the script, like you said.
And like I'm going to call them like little things, but I know that they're not little. They're fundamental. You guys have the cafe, for example, which is a great example of like sustainable food sourcing, composting, using utensils that are either compostable or recycled. Like there's all these little like decisions again that like you make within your household budget, or your organization's budget. They're business choices, right? One of the things is, as we kind of come around the home stretch here, I wanted to talk a little bit about events. We have this Fleur event, which is a new event coming up, and maybe if you guys could talk a little bit about what Fleur is, and but also like I'm interested, like how are you taking these messages from the Climate Toolkit and interpretation and embedding them in the events that you host and organize. Because I think that's another thing that a lot of people have a challenging time with is like everybody loves a party, right? Everybody loves to go to an event. But how do you do it in a way that, is conveying kind of the things that you guys are talking about? But tell me a little bit about Fleur and events and how it all kind of ties together.
Yeah, sure. So Fleur's April 3rd, I think 6:30 to 9:30. And it's going to be really kind of like a stroll through the campus, and there's different performances in different areas. So really diverse sort of things you'll see, like there'll be dance performances. There's some fashion designers making pieces, like a live floral drapery made of live flowers,
French-inspired cocktails.
And cocktails. Cello Fury, I think, is playing. Some opera, and just very cool, just all kinds of different arts and and drinks. You walk around in a beautiful space. It's just like
it's like a Renaissance celebration of botanic.
And the
botanic
thread of nature's all through it. So the dance will be inspired by nature, and the clothes and the fashion designs will be from natural materials or upcycled things. And so that's sort of the backbone through it. But it's an expression of it shows how you can express this connection to nature through way different disciplines, and dance and song and design and food and like all those things you said. Like it's that sort of sustainability thread runs through everything. It's a party. It's a fun time. But the sort of spine of all that is understanding that this is all related to the earth.
Do you guys work at that, going back to kind of the marketing team, for example, and just the team at Phipps, do you curate that intentionally? Like in terms of when events, whether it's an event that you're working on with a group like Pittsburgh Earth Day, or if there's a wedding that's hosted there, is there an intentionality in terms of like, I'll call it the Phipps way, like, is to like bring kind of things you guys do in your day to day into those events?
Sure. Yeah. Our events, if you have, say, a wedding at Phipps, there are certain sort of guidelines that you have to follow. So, a lot of wedding parties, and they have favors and plastic things and stuff. And the events team will work with you and say, well, that's not, we don't do this at Phipps, we do this instead. Or we do, and the catering has to follow guidelines that Phipps provides. And so it's really, there's means to make your event greener.
Wow.
And certainly no less beautiful. I mean, that's the beauty of it. You have this beautiful space, which, who wouldn't want to get married there? But then you also, they're having this wedding, and it's going to be greener than it would be elsewhere. But then you have an audience too that comes to Phipps specifically because they agree with this message and they support, that type of living in general. So you have, everyone wants to have a party there, and we can help you make that party.
That's really cool.
All the more green.
And then one other thing is, because I know it's like 30-some degrees and the rivers are filled with ice, but let's talk about spring real quick.
Sure.
So the flower show's coming up, right?
Spring flower show's coming up. A bloom for every room.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yeah, it'll be lousy with beautiful flowers. You won't be able to get away from no matter how hard you try. And we also have what we're in the install for right now is Tropical Forest Panama. So the room that was Hawaii for the past 3 years, that changes every 3 years to a different bioregion of a tropical rainforest. And this year, this upcoming 3 years, it'll be Tropical Forest Panama, and that will open up on March 1st. So Panama will be new. The Spring Flower Show will be there, and Fleur. So it'll be a great time to visit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mark your calendars. Get to Phipps. Thank you guys so much for sharing with us a bunch of great information about curation and design and how we're interpreting climate. Lots of great stuff here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, real pleasure.
Awesome.
We could probably talk on this for
I know. That's why they give me a clock. Thank you so much for listening into The Green Voice. I'm Grant Ervin with S&B USA. Thank you, Andrew and Adam and the team at Phipps. And the team at Pittsburgh Earth Day, and here at Point Park. Thank you, Wayne and Anthony and everyone. And thank you for listening in. And we'll check you at the next episode. Be well.